SBC Media.
Welcome to the iGaming Daily Podcast, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market.
The gaming industry is once again in the spotlight across multiple jurisdictions that are looking to restrict advertising. Today, the iGaming Daily Podcast examines the similar and contrasting regulatory developments of Portugal and Argentina, as well as some new developments in Chile. In Portugal, Parliament surprises observers by allowing an appeal by Livre to reopen discussions on gambling advertising controls, a debate that has divided political ranks of South Bend. Meanwhile, in Buenos Aires, can senators settle on terms to apply a federal bill on problem gambling protections long sought by Argentine provinces and authorities? We'll discuss this today in iGaming Daily. I'm Fernando Noodt, media manager for SBC and your host for today, and I am joined by Ted Menmuir, editor-at-large for SBC. Ted, how are you today?
Very well, Fernando. Hope all is well.
Yeah, all good, all good. And happy to have also Lucía Gando, SBC Noticias Editor with us. Lu, how are you today?
Hello, guys. Hi, Fer. Always a pleasure to be here and talk about what's going on in Latin America.
Yeah, even though it might feel like we are doing repeating an episode from the past, it's actually not. It's just that governments like to trip with the same stone. I don't know if that's a phrase in English, but before we start with the news about Portugal, Argentina, and Chile, let me ask you a question, guys. Heading to G2E, Optimove is hosting an exclusive sweepstakes industry breakfast. Get market insights and hear from some of the top names in the industry. Find out more on this can't miss event in the description of this episode. Big shout out to Optimove for this breakfast. Sweepstakes, of course, a hot topic in the US, and looking forward to see what the guys have to say, even though we have discussed a lot about it on iGaming Daily. So after this episode, you may feel free to just go ahead and search Optimove on our iGaming Daily search bar, and you will find plenty of information and plenty of insights from the guys at Optimove. But now let's move on to Portugal. Ted, what has triggered Portugal to reopen its advertising, that's how you say it, debate?
So thanks, Fernando. On Friday, the Parliament of San Berto received proposals of Livre, who are a very small house in Portuguese politics, and they are known as the College Party. And of those in that proposal, they accepted 5 requests, and one of them was to have a review on the application of new controls or stricter controls on gambling advertising. And then the other request that was initially accepted but later declined was a review on where scratch cards can be sold. Now, the surprise was that it accepted it from Livre, who, as I mentioned, are one of the smaller houses, and it didn't come from the Socialist Party. But it just reopened this debate in Portugal about its gambling law. And later, by Monday, the Socialist Party, who are in government, they attached a non-binding resolution that, with discussions of advertising, they'd begin re-debates on Portugal's modernization of its gambling laws and a review of gambling since 2015, when it legislated for online gambling and applied a new licensing regime.
And who are Livre? You just mentioned they are not like a majority force, but who are they? Can you provide some more context, and why are they calling for stricter gambling controls?
Well, Livre are small. They carry a very kind of left-wing mandate, but they are different to the Green Party, who are big in Portugal. And I think what you have to understand about Portuguese are the political blocks within the government. So very much like Brazil, you have a conservative bloc, you have a left-wing bloc, and you have a centrist bloc. Livre are very much part of the far left of the left-wing bloc, who have been calling for a number of years for strict measures, including a blanket ban on gambling advertising, and they really want to see kind of a tone down on football's relationship with betting.
It seems like it's always a political battle with this issue because this year Portugal has elections, so I think they are using the industry to fight their internal battles more than try to help society.
It could well be the case. I mean, I'm not surprised about that. And again, in European politics, what we tend to see is that the mandate's coming very early, and you pick kind of the battles that you want to choose on and what you want to present to your grassroots and your delegates.
Yeah, it definitely looks like politicians usually turn to gambling because, of course, the industry tends to have a bad reputation, like it's a evil industry, and so anyone that goes against it is like defending the people or something like that. But we were speaking of battles or confrontations in politics. How has the opposition reacted to Libre's proposal?
It's a mixed bag, and I think where Portugal has an advantage over other European countries is that it hasn't really touched its regulations since 2015. So it's been able to see kind of how gambling regulation has played out across countries like Spain, the Netherlands, other EU nations, in terms of very strict kind of advertising laws being applied, encroachment by the black market, and also what regulations actually work and what is the true protection of the consumer.
And of course, every time that gambling advertising gets frowned upon, or that politicians look into gambling advertising and say, "Hey, we need to restrict this," the industry usually stands in a position that says, "Hey, why are you looking at me where you have multiple other industries that may have harmful impacts on some groups in society, and why are you just looking at me?" So, is this review actually just focused on gambling, or does it have is it more broad?
I think that's a good point to raise because, as you mentioned, what we've seen in other gambling reviews, especially in Europe, is that they tend to kind of spread out. The dynamic isn't just about gaming, but it's about consumer protections, redress, advertising. Also, now we're kind of seeing much more about kind of the overall data rights and how people are engaged with an industry. And I think that will probably apply to how Portugal would choose to review. If it does so, it's Gambling Act, which hasn't been again, it hasn't been touched since 2015. They were one of the first countries to re-review their gaming policies very early before the 2020s.
Yeah, of course, I don't have the opportunity to watch much Portuguese TV, but I can speak from my experience in Argentina, which is I do see a lot of gaming advertising, but I do see a lot of other industries also advertising and also flooding your screen over and over again. And but still, they don't get the same attention as gaming does. So it's curious to see why this happens, and what the industry needs to do to actually prevent that from happening and to defend itself.
Yes, and also we forget the benefits that the industry does bring to the markets, such as Portugal. We had the SBC summit 2 weeks ago, and we know it generated a lot of income from the industry just for one event. Imagine in the everyday life. So we know that governments can benefit from it, and a regulated market is always good for the society in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the actually governments do see that when it comes to hosting an event like SBC Summit, because we had the registration desks at the airport actually. So it's not like we're outcasts or something like that. It's actually working together with the government to actually bring more people into Lisbon, which of course generates a lot of movement in tourism, in restaurants, of course, hotels and all that. So it's definitely there's a lot of benefits that these political parties don't mention when they say, "Hey, gaming is bad. Gaming needs to be restricted." But of course, gaming advertising is in like the main focus of this, but where does Portugal need to actually modernize its framework, its regulatory framework? And could this be an opportunity for stakeholders? What do they need to do? How do they have to like participate and relate to the government to and lawmakers to actually get a, a good outcome out of this?
Okay, so feedback from the market, and especially with regards to Portugal, is that yes, as stands, Portugal has got two gambling laws: one for land-based, one for online. So there's kind of a structural divide in there. I think that if they're looking to kind of review their gambling laws, that's where they start. Actually, how do you apply a whole federal bill onto Portuguese gambling for online, for land-based, and kind of apply kind of centralized kind of consumer protections across the board, right? Not treat kind of both markets differently, and both consumer bases as in different let's say different verticals. That would be kind of the hardest challenge for kind of any review. I think as stands, Salbento's divided in what approach to take to gambling advertising. As we've seen, what happened to the Portuguese market is when they were re-regulated in 2015 and they applied a 25% tax, a lot of Western operators or departed the market. However, in the years since, corresponding to other European regulation, other European markets regulating, the international operators have returned to market. So it is starting to kind of balance that between domestic players and foreign incumbents. Is it time for a review? Yes. I think that Portugal will have kind of more sense in what path it takes with advertising. I don't see it as an all-out ban. I just think that it just happens that a party to the extremes has proposed very strict measures.
And of course, we will follow these developments very closely. For that, you may need to go ahead and enter any of the SBC Media websites and subscribe to all newsletters, because this touches a lot of different topics. So it may be covered in different websites. So if you want to keep up to date with what happens in Portugal, make sure you are subscribed to SBC News newsletter, but also to the other newsletters across of the media network for SBC. Right now, we're gonna do a very quick commercial break, but we'll be right back to discuss what happened in Latin America and what will happen in the next few days.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
And we are back with more iGaming Daily. We had discussed already what is happening in Portugal with gambling advertising, but of course, it's definitely not the only country to look into restricting gambling advertising, as Argentina seems to be making a move on an already partially approved bill. Why don't you take us through that, Lou?
Yes, well, as to this week in Argentina, the Senate is now debating a bill to address problem gambling and regulate online betting. The project already passed the lower house last year, but it hasn't been discussed ever since. We didn't expect it was going to be discussed this year, but it is. So we know that Argentina doesn't have a national regulation, and this would be the first one to be applied nationwide. The goal is to ban advertising in sports. That's the most controversial point. The advertising ban would apply to all media, social networks, and even in team shirts and stadiums. So it's going to be huge. And on the other side, it also requires biometric controls to block minors, which is one of the main concerns right now in the country. And it's the main argument that people against the industry is using, because we know that sports betting and iGaming have grown among teenagers. So if it is approved, football clubs like River Plate, Boca Juniors, Racing Club, or even the national team and the AFA would have to drop their betting sponsors.
Yeah, a lot of sponsors for the Argentina national team, world champions. Woohoo! Yep. Just in case anyone forgot. Actually, on the SBC Summit floor, a lot of companies from the gaming industry showcasing that they are proud partners of the Argentina national team. Something that may change if if this bill actually gets approved.
Is there any kind of room for bargaining in terms of, look, you've got two, actually, I think you got three kind of frameworks in, you got Cordoba provinces, BA, and the executive of city BA. Do you think there's any kind of bargaining on the advertising?
I mean, I think it's a very complex situation right now because the national government has been doing like um, cutting down expense ever since it took office. The Javier Milei administration has been cutting down on expense, and that means that they have cut down the funds they share with the provinces. So provinces need to generate cash for themselves, and one of the things and the industries that generates cash exclusively from the industries from the provinces for the provinces is the gaming industry because under the constitution the regulation for all gaming is a faculty of each province. Like there's no, like Lou said, federal regulation for the industry, and there can't be federal regulation for the industry because the constitution says it's a thing that the provinces need to see. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the lawmakers that answer to each governor will react and will act on the Senate when discussing this bill, because of course they need money and the gaming industry is generating money for them. So I'm not so sure this is actually gonna go through, but of course I've made a lot of wrong forecasts in the past on this podcast. So
Haven't
if
we
you
all?
yeah. So let's just hashtag wait and see where this goes. But I don't think the governors of the provinces will support this, because they also have been not supportive of Javier Milei's administration, even though this is not coming from Milei, it's himself. But being in a federal proposal, like a proposal to apply to the country as a whole, um, I don't think this is going to have much support, at least not from the provinces. But Lou, why don't you very briefly break down what the general perception of the gaming industry is in Argentina right now, so we can better understand where this is coming from?
Well, it's mixed. Of course, the industry is very against it. Betting companies invest a lot in football sponsorship and media. So they are very visible. That is true, that society can see them. But we know that this investment is always good for sports, as it means more development, commercial opportunities, and therefore stronger teams and international presence. But there is a growing concern in society about problem gambling, minors betting, and aggressive advertising. So that's why the debate in the Congress is so important right now, and it generates a lot of controversial points of view.
Moving across the Andes Mountains, Chile has also targeted the gaming industry, as the Supreme Court has just ruled against unlicensed iGaming companies and ordered internet service providers to block them in the country, Lou.
That's right. Yesterday, well, at the beginning of the week, Chile's Supreme Court has now ordered internet providers in the country to fully block unlicensed betting sites. Uh, we have to say that these very well known companies like Betano, Coolbet, Betson, or whatever, both in Chile and internationally, they don't have licenses right now in the country because there is no regulation. Operators argue that under the current legal framework, it's not actually illegal neither. So, this ruling will have a major impact on Chile's market and could really harm the industry.
I think it's really important to kind of underline what Lucía said, and I think to an extent you're kind of downplaying just how skim Chile's statute is in terms of gambling law. If you actually look at its legal boundaries at the moment, there is no mention whatsoever about online gambling. Its gambling statute is about 2 paragraphs, and then it's just looking at it from kind of Western eyes, there's a lot of hurdles that Chile has to jump before it can finalize kind of a gambling law. I think it had kind of good progress in 2023, as in terms of kind of defining a tax framework and kind of the criminal kind of the legislative remit in terms of the kind of criminality of gambling. But it's really stalled since then. There's a lot of kind of political interplays happening in that market. It's a shame. It's a shame. But I don't see it kind of having that same legal kind of platform that you've seen in Colombia or Brazil. And the other problem here is just how powerful kind of the municipal businesses or municipal casinos are in shaping that legislation.
Yeah, of course, there's a lot of players in Chile making or lobbying against iGaming regulation for some time. Some say, "Hey, we just want like the proper framework to be elaborated before we regulate on this." But let me doubt about that. And of course, there's like Lou said when discussing Portugal, elections and politics play a big role in this, and Chile has a presidential election in November as well. So that's probably gonna be a bit of a hurdle for any regulation whatsoever to make any progress. But this is not the first time actually a decision like this happens in Chile, is it?
No, it's not. But this particular decision came after the state operator Lotería de Concepción filed legal action. Similar rulings already happened in 2023, but the enforcement was limited. It didn't have that much impact. Also, their Chile regulator banned all the advertisement in football. But now the court is very clear. Only state lotteries, licensed casinos can operate, and it's mandatory for internet companies to block all the gaming sites. So the government is also pushing a bill to regulate the market, but let's wait and see.
And Ted, to wrap this episode up, how do you assess these types of developments happening all over in Latin America, and how can the industry prevent further restrictions from being enforced?
I don't think the industry prevent anything that, at that kind of political level, it really comes down to, who those actors are. Does the market really want to kind of push itself towards legalization, or does it just want to remain in the gray? You've got to kind of take this on a market by market basis. Again, kind of just reading into Chile, I think there was kind of structural issues right away with that, and a lot of it was about how old the articles were and how kind of limited they were, and even defining gambling in itself, and how that market has grown within kind of Chile. I think again, like many markets in Latin America, I think 2026 is going to be kind of a point of inflection for them. What direction they choose, or is it just going to be stalling till the end of the decade?
So could it be the end of the gaming industry? No, I'm just kidding.
Please.
Yeah, it's like we were keeping like this.
I miss you guys too much. And
No, it's just kidding. We're gonna be paying a lot of attention to what happens in Chile, Argentina, and Portugal as well, of any other countries that decide to go on a change for regulation in gaming. So if you want to keep up to date, make sure you follow iGaming Daily on your preferred social podcasting platform. Also subscribe to all SBC media outlets. Thank you very much, Lucía Gando, Ted Menmuir. Thank you very much, James Ross, for producing this episode. I'm Fernando Noodt. And to our listeners out there, we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for listening to today's iGaming Daily podcast, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News network or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.